everyone, and welcome to Action Against Hunger's virtual discussion on innovation within childhood nutrition. My name is Matt Gordon. I'm a Senior Development Officer with Action Against Hunger, and I want to thank everyone for attending today's conversation. Joining me today is a member of Action Against Hunger's Advisory Council, Roger Thurow. Roger is an author and former foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, and is currently a Senior Fellow for Global Agriculture and Food Policy for the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. He is a scholar in residence at Auburn University's Hunger Solutions Institute, frequently speaking about global nutrition and hunger around the world. Roger, welcome to the discussion.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. Delighted to join you. And always a great admirer of the work of Action Against Hunger. So thank you.
Well, we're grateful to have you here, Roger. So before we begin, I just want to remind everyone listening that if they have any questions during the chat, we've enabled a Q&A feature, and we encourage our audience members to submit their questions. And we'll do our very best at the end of the discussion to answer those questions. So with that said, we'd like to begin this conversation by providing our audience with a bit of context. Roger, I was wondering if you could provide some clarity into how the humanitarian sector has historically addressed childhood malnutrition, and why is it so important for young children and mothers to receive proper nutritional support?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And it's so important that I think, we'll all recognize, intellectually and instinctively that nutrition is so important for all of us, right? And that in the context of, say, international development, good nutrition becomes the cornerstone of all development aspects, whether it's infrastructure things or sanitation and health or education or policy issues. Good nutrition, particularly for moms and their children in this critical first 1,000 days period. So from the time a mom first becomes pregnant to the second birthday of the child. So good nutrition is so important because it really sets the foundation for good physical health, good cognitive development, because all the executive functions that we use every second of every day to interpret the world around us and to understand things, that's all developing during that critical first 1,000 day period. And then also our immune system is strengthened during that time, all basically on the foundation of good nutrition. Any bout of malnutrition or no access or little access to nutritious foods during that time, again, particularly the 1,000 days, that can often lead to stunting, both physically and cognitively. And so stunting then is normally a childhood measurement. The clinical definition, academic medical definition of a child that then would be too short for age, because of this, the nutritional aspects. But what stunting really is, it's a life sentence of underachievement and underperformance. Stunted children, although it's a measurement for children under 5, stunted children then become stunted adults in most cases. So that's why we talk about and we think about this life sentence of underachievement and underperformance. And when you think about, look, if it's still kind of in where we are in 2022, it's astonishing that still about one in every four and one in every 5 children under 5 years old in our world today are stunted in some manner, largely because of this malnutrition or undernutrition, poor nutrition, this first 1,000-day period. And what are we losing through this? Because it's stunted bodies, stunted brains, but stunting ambitions, stunting potential. And so what are we losing through all of this? And so, because we have to imagine what might a stunted child have achieved for all of us were they not malnourished during this particular time. And into your other part of the question about kind of how the humanitarian and development world has dealt with nutrition over time. Sadly, it hasn't been that well. That again, we know that kind of nutrition is everywhere in human growth and societal growth, because it's not only the importance of childhood, of the development of an individual, but by extension, the development of families, communities, society as a whole. And so nutrition is everywhere in kind of the real world, but it was virtually nowhere in terms of development strategy and certainly investments. And so over the past decades, it's been like less than 1% of all like overseas development aid has gone to nutrition. And so it really makes you kind of smack your head and wonder, how does that translate into the central nature of nutrition translate then to being marginalized a lot of times in development strategy, and certainly with investments. And how do we prioritize that? So that's where the world is going to now. How do we prioritize investments, particularly in nutrition, particularly in this first 1,000-day period?
It's well said, Roger. You mentioned the 1,000 days model. That might be something that many people might not have heard of or might not understand. Could you elaborate? What is the first 1,000 days model?
Yeah. So again, it's something. So the first 1,000 days has always been there, obviously, throughout human history. Everybody goes through it. It's kind of one of the certainly one of the common practices that everybody experiences. But again, it wasn't really a focus of development efforts. So when thinking about childhood nutrition, it was like, okay, the importance of nutrition, maybe when children start getting to school and the school meals programs, which are so fantastic and helpful. And we see them in the United States and how important the school lunch and breakfast programs are for our children in the United States. And so we see the development of that. But again, it wasn't on, the children, and particularly the proper nutrition of moms during their pregnancy. Once the child is born and the moms are breastfeeding, and that's the nutrients then that are going to the child. When the child starts, becoming eating solid foods and diversifying the diet, what is the availability of good nutrition then? In the households, in the farms, and in the rural settings where so many people are living. And so that's why then the focus started shifting to this 1,000-day period, again, from when a mom becomes pregnant to the second birthday of the child. And so that's why, so kind of things that are being done, education is so important. So when I was reporting the book, The First 1,000 Days, where I followed moms and their children through this 1,000-day period in India, Uganda, Guatemala, and Chicago, to see the education, the moms gathering, either in small groups, on verandas, of a clinic, in community halls, on their porches, in their homes, and this education of here's what good nutrition is. Here's the foods that it's in. Here's where these foods are found, and a lot of times it's all around them. In more of an urban setting, it's okay. Here's what's available, hopefully in the shops, the foods to look for with the good nutrients, and particularly how to prepare them, how to cook them, how to get them in your diet. So very simple things that we think are, should be kind of no-brainers, but in reality, this knowledge, this information is quite revolutionary in the lives of so many moms and families around the world, including in the United States. And so that's why the moms and the families in Chicago as kind of the exemplar for, the rich world, the richer precincts of the world. So this is so important for them. And, what we find is that these good nutrition, particularly in the first 1,000 days, for moms and the children, that is like the humanity's greatest common denominator, or math, the lowest common denominator. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, or well-educated or illiterate, whether rural or urban, or Republican or Democrat, or whatever kind of political affiliation you have. These are so important to everybody. Is part of this. And so the commonalities of people across the world, of humanity, that this period, this 1,000 days, the need for good nutrition during that time is something that binds us all together. And so that's why there's been much more focus on that time and a lot more investment money going into that. And that's all to be applauded and cheered. It's like, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we keep that at the top priority, particularly in the minds of decision makers, policymakers, that it's front and center with them, that this is such an important period of time. Again, because, and it's for everybody. So again, there's this universal nature of it, this commonality for all of us, that we see that, a stunted child anywhere then becomes a stunted child everywhere. Because if we look at this lost potential, this life sentence of underachievement and performance, what are we missing? Again, what might a stunted child, malnourished child have accomplished for all of us were they not malnourished, particularly during this 1,000-day period? And so, it might be, this loss of potential, like a novel not written, or a poem not conceived, or a new gadget invented, or an innovation nurtured, or new horizon that's not explored, or a new cure that's not discovered. What are we all missing? So kind of a theme of the book, and I think something for us all to remember, is this lost chance of greatness for any child becomes a lost chance of greatness for us all. And that is a profound loss and opportunity cost that also needs to be calculated in all of this. So that's why all this is so important in the first 1,000-day period. Both the education, as we know, knowledge is power, but then you need to have the ability to put that knowledge, that power into action. So there we find that the obstacles of poverty, of kind of the variances in the wealth gaps and in society, in race, and the inequalities and injustices then of the world that then come into play as, they're always there and impacting everything, but then particularly on a nutritional front. Okay, we know what's important, but how do we access it? How do we include that in our diets when we might be living in a food desert, or just prices are too high? And now we see kind of inflation and price increases, all around the world from various factors. So this period, this 1,000 days, and becomes incredibly important and vital for all of us.
Thank you, Roger. When we know that roughly 45 million children around the world are suffering from severe malnutrition, it's abundantly clear that addressing hunger and proper nutrition at such an early age not only improves the health and well-being of the child, but has the chance to prevent those numerous challenges in the future that can affect their livelihoods and their potential. So with that, we'd actually like to share a quick video from Action Against Hunger's team in India, who have made the first 1,000 days model integral in their efforts to eradicate childhood malnutrition.
In 2011, Action Against Hunger made a humble start in India, joining the fight to address malnutrition. Since then, we have broadened our reach, aligning with the Government of India's 1,000 Days Nutrition Program. The 1,000 Days Program is a holistic approach based on the wisdom that healthy mothers tend to have healthy babies. Receiving good nutrition in the first 1,000 days from conception till a child's second birthday is critical. It helps in building a strong immune system and ensuring healthy physical and intellectual development. Using the deep roots we have developed in the community, our community mobilizes, counsel expectant mothers and their families, stressing the importance of proper nutrition and sanitation.
हमारा होम विजिट्स का रहता है मेन तो कि जो प्रेग्नेंट लेडी है जितना ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा हम उससे मिल सकें हम कोशिश करते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी कम से भी कम 3 बार तो हर ट्राइमेस्टर में हम उससे मिलते हैं, और जितना ज़्यादा होता है उतनी जल्दी हम न्यूबॉर्न के पास पहुंचने की कोशिश करते हैं।
Days model is a great example of how research and innovation can improve how the humanitarian sector addresses childhood nutrition. This shifts us to the second part of our conversation. We've spoken about why it's so important to address hunger and malnutrition at such a young age. Let's discuss the resources that are at Action Against Hunger's disposal. There are a number of tools that Action Against Hunger utilizes in the field to provide children and mothers with proper nutritional support. But 3 critical tools that we want to emphasize today are the F100 Therapeutic Milk, Plumpy Nut, and the Middle Upper Arm Circumference Band, sometimes commonly referred to as the MUOC band. Roger, could you shed some light on the F100 Therapeutic Milk and Plumpy Nut? I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of one or both of these products, but it would be great to better understand what they are and how they're utilized in the field.
Absolutely, and to see them utilized in the field it's a really enlightening and inspiring action because you see kind of what a difference these can make. What I really liked about that video, by the way, is that showing kind of the meetings and, whether it was groups of moms and families or in individual settings, and taking this knowledge into the houses, into the community centers and things is so important and so vital. So it took me back to many scenes that I had during my reporting on this. So well done on that. And yeah, so the F100 therapeutic milk. So nutritionists were looking for a way of kind of new and had developed various formulas and models for the proper for the nutrients that would be best, and how do we get them to the moms and the children and the malnourished, of whatever age, but particularly for the children. And so then it was a matter of, well, how do we distribute them in the field? And they then came across, so with the F100, of turning this kind of mathematical and scientific formula. Okay, here's the nutrients that are good and the impact that they can have, and we think will work. How do we get it to them? And so to then turn that into a powdered milk that's laden with these nutrients, and then would be mixed with water. So that was the thing that then aided getting that out into the field. Okay, so there's a package, so it's in a can, it's in a sachet or something of the powder, and then you basically open the package and you add water. Then it becomes this liquid mixture that's easier to take and administer, and then to transport and to take around. Then you could have that, mainly in clinical settings, so in hospitals, in clinics, in these therapeutic treatment, almost tent villages that set up in an area where there's an area of crisis on malnutrition and hunger. But then they saw the limitations from that, so they knew that so milk-based products can become breeding grounds for bacteria, either when mixed with contaminated water to begin with, because a lot of the settings that you're in, there's that sanitation, water hygiene issue that is so important for underpinning and supporting all the great nutrition efforts. So all these things have to work together. So either when mixed with contaminated water or when it's left out in the open, so it would be mixed and maybe kind of in a bigger cauldron or a vat or something, and particularly in hot weather, in a lot of these instances, that's where it would be humid weather. That then becomes this breeding ground for contamination as well. So then the thought went on, oh, is there a different way to deliver this? And so a number of nutritionists then were working with, so maybe a bar, right? And so they were working on chocolate for a while. Okay, well, kids will like chocolate. If you can mix the nutrients into there was kind of a matter of, okay, let's get the taste right. But then, the chocolate would kind of melt in a lot of these places, or it wasn't so shelf-stable and storage-wise for that. So that was a problematic, and that was kind of a vexing concern with them. And then, it was kind of a serendipitous moment where then, some of the nutritionists then realized, wait a minute, a spread. Maybe we can do it as a spread, like, Nutella or peanut butter, right? Peanut butter, let's settle on that. So then they worked with peanut butter as a spread, introduced the nutrients to that. So kind of the same F100 formula that was in powder now into this spread. And it didn't change the nature of the spread. It still tasted well and was acceptable to children that would be consuming that. And so that then becomes plumping nut. And it's just in kind of a little sachet. And you can, as we see in the photo, the moms, the nutritionists, the community workers, you just snip a corner of that and then it comes out. And so that made then this whole new avenue of community-based therapeutic treatment. So with the F100, it was usually like, okay, let's bring the children into this clinical setting where we can kind of control the nature of the F100 formula. But then you were bringing children into kind of a crowded situation. Diseases could spread, more rapidly. Parents had to leave their homes and other children perhaps to come into that area and be with their child while they're receiving this treatment. Plumping Nut then opened a way for them to be able to take this to the communities and to the homes and to the mothers, and then the mothers could then administer this themselves to their children. So kind of open up whole new avenues of treatment and kind of stability and sanitation in areas as well.
Thank you, Roger. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that F100 therapeutic milk is essentially a easy to use nutrient-enriched milk, and Plumpy Nut is kind of the same type of product, but a more accessible product in a peanut butter paste form. Does that sound right?
Yep, absolutely. And it was all about how to enhance, make the treatment in the field, that much more efficient, and then to how do we get it into the homes and into the hands of the moms and the dads and the parents and the caregivers themselves.
And what about the MUOC band, the middle upper arm circumference band? How is that tool used in the field?
Yeah, that's also fascinating. So that's mainly used, as the way I see it and have observed it, is it becomes a, it's more on the prevention side as opposed to the treatment side. So the F100, the plumpy nut, the therapeutic treatment of severely malnourished children. The MUOC band is kind of an early warning system, an indication of something is amiss with the nutrition based on the standard measure of what they're doing on the arm and where it's placed. One can see that there needs to be more nutrients. It's too thin, muscle structure too weak or something. So that just based on those measurements, again, as we see that, okay, we need to do something on the nutrition front. And so then they'll discuss with the moms. So it's for the children and then also for the moms, right? Particularly, during their pregnancies, that, okay, mom, we need to do something on the nutrients on your front as well, but then particularly for the children. So it becomes this early warning system. And I saw this kind of evolution again. So the evolution from F100 to plumpy nut, and then how the MUOC band comes to play in all this, the treatment and prevention as well. That when I returned to Ethiopia in a couple of years ago, to the same place I had been in 2003, in the kind of the area of Awassa, so south of Addis Ababa, the capital. And when I was there in 2003, it was the first great hunger crisis, the first famine of the 21st century. Of this grand new millennium of ours, it's like, 3 years into this new millennium, here we are with 14 million people on the doorstep of starvation, being kept alive if they were going to survive at all by international food aid that was coming into the country. A lot of these therapies were being rolled out, particularly plumpy nut at that time, and being deployed in these therapeutic feeding tents that had been set up en masse in some of these areas and in the particular hunger hotspots. And so there you could see kind of the deployment of that and how that worked. And in these feeding tents, there were just dozens upon dozens of children, basically on a doorstep of starvation. And there you can see the impacts of these formulas, and particularly of the plumpy nut being deployed then. So when I went back then, say 16 years after that, to that same area where those tents had been set up in this rural area, in a field that had been kind of where the market square, where farmers might bring their crops and their surpluses to sell, that had become this emergency feeding tent and grounds of all these emergency feeding tents. Now there was a little clinic there. Now that the clinic had expanded into kind of a regular full-sized hospital with an emergency ward and lab facilities and things, but there was also big grounds with trees and very green and open air. And there was a great gathering of moms and children who were getting this knowledge, particularly on the 1,000 days of the nutrition, the foods, how to mix them, how to bring them into your diets, how to prepare them. And then at the same time, the moms and their children, particularly the children that were there, they were all then going through the MUOC band measurement. And that to me was, here's this evolution from treatment to this prevention and this early warning, because they would say, Mom, your child's doing well, keep it up. Or, all these nutrients and nutritious things that we're talking about, let's get them into the child's diet and into your diet as well. And so that to me was this great kind of progression of how these treatments have gone on over time.
Thanks, Roger. It's very clear that the band does serve as an early warning system and almost like a nutrition thermometer for parents, so that if a child is showing those signs of malnutrition, parents can immediately address those concerns and get the help the child needs.
Absolutely.
So with that, we'd actually like to share with our audience members how these tools are actually being used in the field. We're going to show a quick video on the story of Halima, a 2-year-old girl from Somalia who was struggling with malnourishment before Action Against Hunger intervened with life-saving support.
Meet Halima, a healthy, happy 2-year-old girl and daughter to Father Ma. But just a few months ago, life was very different. Back in February, before the COVID-19 pandemic, Halima was admitted to an Action Against Hunger treatment center with life-threatening hunger. Her hands and feet were swollen, her skin was peeling, and she urgently needed medical help.
waxaa dareemay yani walwal badan hooyo wax dhashay yani ismidheenin yani gabadhaada xanuunkan oo dhibkan badan ee mareyso laakiin ismidheen nolol ay kugu fakanaysaa xanuun badan aad dareemay cabsi badan.
Action Against Hunger are helping children just like Halima in Somalia and around the world. More than 2 million children under the age of 5 die every year globally because their diet lacks the nutrition to keep them healthy and safe from preventable diseases. It can take just 6 weeks to bring a child back from the brink. A course of life-saving therapeutic food can transform a child's life, just like it did for Halima.
marka waxay hadda wixii la sii waa iska cuntaa wayna faraxsantahay ku ciyaartaa maasha Allah alxamdulillah
waa ku faraxsanahay gabadheeda caafimaadka iyo heshay hadda isi barbaartan waxa rajeynaa inaad dugsi iskool aad geysto.
Just $50 can pay for the life-saving therapeutic food that transformed Halima's health in just 6 weeks. There are many other children all over the world that desperately need your help.
waxaa u mahadnaqayaa dhakhaatiirta gabadheeda oo ii soo daaweysay way ku mahadsan yihiin asxaabta jisakala.
Please do what you can to help. Thank you.
The success we see with Halima can be directly attributed to the life-saving tools of Plumpy Nut and the Muak Band and can ensure that children like Halima grow up healthy and strong. Roger, to wrap up, we've gotten a chance to discuss how the humanitarian sector historically addresses malnutrition and the innovative and resourceful ways in which we've adapted and improved our approach. But I was wondering if you had any final thoughts on why there needs to be continued innovation, what obstacles may be in our path to success, and where can we make improvements?
Yeah, so that's really important. How do we keep up this momentum, this trend towards more attention to nutrition, investments in nutrition? The innovation is so critical because we keep finding kind of new roadblocks that come up or more obstacles that come up. So during COVID-19, so how does all this factor into that and into a pandemic situation? Because we all saw, particularly in the United States, how kind of visceral this all became to everybody. We saw how swiftly that health crisis of COVID-19 became a nutritional crisis when schools closed. So the children, no matter where they were in the world, weren't getting these school feeding programs and these school meal programs that would be available to them. The supply chain breakdowns. So certainly probably with the distribution of Plumpy Nut to places. If places were now more inaccessible, well, how do we get it to them? The ingredients that go into the makeup of that, the economic downturn and how that made it just more difficult to put this knowledge into play that, okay, we know the nutrients that are good. Now, if jobs are lost and the downturn in the economy and the supply chain are broken, that all then comes into play with that. So that comes up. Now we see kind of what's going on in Ukraine. And we see these pictures out of Ukraine and the images of, moms giving birth kind of in the subway stations, that would be underground, in other protected natures, all the moms and children that are, pregnant moms included, and then with young babies that are refugees. And so the continued innovation. So how best to treat them and to make sure that they have the proper nutrients, during all this time. The investments are really important. So to keep that up, so through scaling up nutrition, kind of a global program that brings awareness to this, making sure that nutrition is front and center in all these efforts to evolve our food system, that it becomes more about nourishing the world as opposed to just feeding the world. So nourishing and the vital parts of the components of these minerals and and nutrients that are so important for all of us. And then with, in the face of climate change and other planetary boundaries in terms of, soil health and water health and availability, that all goes into agriculture and how that mixes there. So that nutrition is front and center of all these discussions, whether it goes from, the agriculture systems to combating climate change, to keep nutrition front and center there, and particularly this 1,000-day period, because otherwise we'll see that, like during the pandemic, it'll be, I think the nutritional aspects are what will carry the impact of COVID far into the future. Again, the children that are malnourished during the pandemic and during the COVID times, and the stunting that results for that, again, that carries into the future. Stunted children become stunted adults. This lack of potential that we're going to see over time. So this rolls through time, it rolls across space and across places. So that's why it's so important that we keep on top of these, that we keep nutrition front and center. We don't fall back into a time of complacency and neglect that, okay, yeah, we know nutrition is important, but it's kind of sidestepped, right? And it's put off to the side. Nope, it needs to be front and center, kind of on our thinking of everything. And then again, if we think of climate change, the innovations that have to come along with that. If we're working in drier places of the world, or warmer places of the world, or wetter places of the world, what does that mean to the nutritional status and the deployment of some of these treatments as well? And then the cost, that when we look at it, kind of the cost of inaction being more than the cost of action, because the world, or the cost of these interventions, the World Bank estimates that the cumulative cost of childhood malnutrition and stunting, the cumulative cost, again, over time, throughout place and space, cost the global economy perhaps as much as $3.5 trillion with a T dollars a year. $3.5 trillion, that's a huge number in terms of lost productivity and education of the children who then become adults, the lost economic activity, the greater healthcare cost, lost trade opportunities and things. So this cost of inaction far outweighs than whatever investments in money then is really needed on this front.
Well said, Roger. Well, at this time, we'd like to open up the floor to our audience members if they have any questions. As I had mentioned at the beginning of the chat, there is a Q&A feature that our audience members are welcome to use on the side of their screen, and we can go ahead and start taking a few of our questions now. Roger, a member of the audience would like to know, your first book, the book of the first 1,000 days, was written in 2016. A lot has changed since then. If you were able to, write an update or an addendum to the book, what would you add?
Interesting you mentioned that, because I'm hoping coming up again in coming months to return to my international travels and to now go back to the places and to revisit, feature in the book and the families that are at the center of the book in India, Uganda, Guatemala, and Chicago. See what kind of impact there has been during the pandemic and during COVID. Again, a lot of them are in agriculture areas. What is happening there during times of drought or flooding or weather extremes that they're encountering, and kind of the difficulties when, in growing the nourishing food for them. Then also in urban settings, or so in the United States, well, what has gone on the policy front? In the United States, we saw extensions and increases in the SNAP benefits, so the formerly known as food stamps, the women and infant children nutrition funding that's available, extended school meals, extended child tax credits. Are they going to continue? There's talk that no, we'll end them now. Okay, well, maybe the pandemic's over, we can end some of these programs. So it's again the what I'm really interested in, be looking at, is the continued vigilance and centering of nutrition and kind of what's new out there that could help.
Well said. I have one other question from the audience, because I just want to be cognizant of our time. How can the listeners contribute to continue to advocate on behalf of this work and this critical humanitarian issue?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a journalist, and so I've often wondered, well, what can I do about all of this, right? I'm not out in the field, with kind of your field experts. I'm not a nutritionist or an economist or a farmer or an ag person or anything in particular. Talk to a lot of them. But we can all raise the clamor, right? To put this issue front and center with our decision makers, with our policy makers, on whatever level, local to federal, again, whatever country you are in, to the corporations and their role in all of this, to the philanthropies, to the billionaires of the world, right? Hey, this is something that is so important for all of us. Again, a lost chance of greatness for any one child in the world becomes a lost chance of greatness for us all. This should be a priority that is front and center for all of us. So raise the clamor. Everybody, no matter kind of what your skill set is, or your educational background, or your career, or your passion, if this is something you're interested in, every one of us has the ability to contribute something to this great cause of finally conquering hunger and malnutrition. The one thing we can all do is raise the clamor, use our voice to say, this isn't right. What's wrong with us? Why do we tolerate this? We can do something about this. So raising the clamor is top of my list of priorities.
I couldn't agree with you more, Roger. And listen, I want to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to provide both clarity and context into how critical childhood nutrition is and why it's so important that we need to continue innovating and adapting scalable solutions.
So my pleasure. Thanks for having me and for raising the clamor on this issue. This is a vital part of doing that. So thank you and keep up your great work.
And I think we'll end it there. So I just want to thank everyone for joining this afternoon's discussion. We apologize if we were unable to get to your questions, but we encourage you to check out Action Against Hunger's website to find more information on our international programs and our interventions to address malnutrition. Thank you again and have a pleasant rest of your day.
Thank you.